helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, Canadian certified counselor and award-winning psychotherapist.
Hi, this is Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services, and I want to thank you for joining us in this episode of the Life Transformation Radio Show. Today, our show is about God concept. Yes, we each carry a God concept, an idea of God that we hold in our minds that affect how we relate to God, our ability to accept forgiveness, and even our ability to forgive ourselves and forgive others. And so stay tuned, because we are going to be looking more closely at this God concept. The verse we'll be using today is taken from Matthew 25, verse 24, where we had someone with a very unhealthy God concept. And it's the story of the talents. And the person who received the one talent in the story, it reads in verse 24, "Then the man who had received the one talent came. 'Master,' he said, 'I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you.'" So in other words, this man, because of his concept of the master, who in the story represents God, was unproductive, did not do anything with his talents because he was living in fear. Well, maybe you're not in fear of God in the sense that you're afraid of him, but maybe your concept of him is limiting your productivity, it's limiting the quality of your relationships, and it's limiting even the quality of your relationship with God. Stay tuned to find out. Before we get into that today, let me welcome those of you as listeners, first-time listeners and listeners who have been with us throughout the weeks. Welcome again to this episode of the Life Transformation Radio Show. For those of you who are first-time listeners, you can find out more about us by going to our website at elimcounsellingministry.com. We would also like for you to interact with us through our Facebook page. If you have a comment that you'd like to leave about this show or about any aspect of the ministry, feel free to do so on the Facebook page. Again, it's Elim Counselling Ministry. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's ministry.com. And the phone number again is 613-699-1677. I'm very excited to be talking about this God concept today, because I think that there are many people who are going to be finding freedom as a result of understanding how to develop this healthy God concept, and to even the realization that you have an unhealthy concept can be very freeing in a number of ways. We are going to get into that. But before I do so today, let me welcome my co-host, Melissa. Melissa, welcome, and thank you for being with us on this show again. This show would never be the same without you.
The feeling is mutual, Michael. We were joking or discussing actually just before we went on air that this is year 3 for us. We're almost at 150 shows or something crazy like that. But it's always a joy and a pleasure to join you in studio and to go through these topics. And what I love the most, I must say, is when we do the Bible or the biblically based shows. And yes, Elim Counselling Ministry, what we do through our ministry and the counseling that we provide, it is based on the Bible, and we are believers who bring that into the work that we do. But at the same time, what I really like is when you can pinpoint these verses in the Bible that sometimes we've read 100 times and really pull out the essence of it, and how from a mental health and a counseling perspective, some of the lessons that we can learn there can be applied to our lives today. It always makes it come alive for me. And so I'd be remiss to not speak about actually Elim in and of itself before we get into today's show a little bit more. Here we are talking already like good old friends, and people out there who maybe have joined us for the first time are thinking, who in the heck is Elim? Is Michael Elim? I know you've been asked that before.
Yeah, am I Mr. Elim? My name is not Mr. Elim. My name is Michael Hart. Elim is a place in the Bible from from Exodus chapter 15. It's the place where the Israelites went after being freed from Egypt, and it's the first place that they went where they had rest, they had hope, they had running waters and palm trees. So Elim represents in scripture this place of hope and renewal and a prospect of prosperity.
And so this is where when you started your counseling service, got the name. Yeah. So Elim is a professional counseling service located here in Ottawa. We also have satellite clinics in the Cornwall area. And we do a variety of different events and retreats in and around the Ottawa and greater Ottawa area that really tries to tackle issues related to mental health, relationships. And it's done from a Christian perspective through trained certified psychotherapists. And so in that vein, there's professional counseling services that are provided, often that are subsidized through many insurance programs. We also have a sliding scale available for individuals who may not be able to access counseling services but need it. So to that end, we do also accept donations from individuals, both as listeners or people who may have had counseling themselves, so that we can provide these services at a subsidized rates for individuals who need it. If you want to reach out to us, either about the show or our counseling services, you can give us a call at 613-699-1677, or you can reach out through our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. There you'll also find links to our email, to our Twitter page, our Twitter feed, as well as our Facebook page if you want to get a hold of us that way. Is that enough? Is that who we are?
You do a great job. I can just sit here and keep listening to you for the rest of the show, Melissa.
150 shows. I've sort of got it in my head. But we really do encourage you to reach out to us, as we say in many shows. If you have an idea for a show, or if you or someone you love needs help, please do not hesitate to contact us through either our phone number, again, 613-699-1677, or through the website, elimcounselingministry.com. So as you've teed us up, you've got us all ready, Michael, for today's topic, which is God concept. And as I was saying, some of my favorites are the ones that are drawn from the Bible, and you've often put a spin on them and reveal them in such a way that, for me at least, I've never thought of them in that way before. But when I hear the explanations, it's so refreshing, because it's a new way of viewing and bringing the scriptures to life in a way that we can apply today. So the scripture you've identified today is actually a parable, and it's in Matthew 25, verse 24 is a specific verse. But for those of listeners who may not be familiar with the parable as a whole, it's the parable of the talents. Can you just give us a brief summary of what this parable is all about?
Yes, Melissa, thank you for that good introduction to Elim and to the show and all of that. I think now it's going to be a hard act to follow up.
Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. No worries there.
Okay, so this parable is about 3 men who were given different sums of money by their master. So one was given 5 talents, the other was given 2 talents, and then another was given 1 talent. And these 3 servants was expected to take care of that money and invest it until the master returned from a long trip that he went on. And so the persons who receive the first talent, the 5 talents went and multiplied it, got 10. The person who received 2 talents multiplied it, got 2. But the person who had the 1 talent, who was the subject in the story that we have just read, that person, when the master came to him and it was his time to give an account for the money, he said to the master, "I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground." So in other words, he did nothing with the money because of his God concept. And the master in this parable represents God. And so this person's concept of who God is saw God as a hard man and lived his life in fear and did nothing with what he was given. And as a result, he was chastised by the master.
And so one question I have is, could it also not be said that maybe this guy was just discouraged that he only got the 1 talent? Like he felt a bit cheated or robbed? Or Because how much value does a talent actually have? Because I would think, man, I just got one. What am I going to do with this? Everyone else got so much more than myself. Could that not be how he was feeling?
Well, I think when we think about it as, one person getting 5 talent, and a talent is a sum of money. And because it's a biblical currency, we might get the wrong sense that this person was just given $1 or one little gold coin, and this person had 5 gold coin. But let's not feel sorry for the person with the 1 talent, because a talent was actually a large sum of money in those days. For example, we are told by theologians that a talent was the equivalent of about 6,000 denarii. And since a denarius was a day's wages for a common laborer, that person that might work 300 days a year, a talent would be worth nearly 20 years' wages. So this person, don't feel sorry to say, okay, he was discouraged. Maybe it's just because the master didn't give him much. So this person received 20 years wages. So this is an enormous sum of money that he got when he was in charge of. So that means that the master had confidence in him to give that sum of money for him to be in charge of. But because of his concept of the master, he was afraid and did nothing with the money. I think the message behind this story is that each and every one of us have enormous capabilities. Even those of us who think we only have the 1 talent or have less than others, there is an enormous untapped potential that is within all of us. This 1 talent is 20 years' wages, as I have said before. So each of us have something that is enormously valuable. But sometimes our God concept, the way that we think about God, prevents us from maximizing the return on that talent, from accomplishing our potential, achieving our full potential in God. So the story tells us that this servant, he was afraid. He had a negative emotion, and he went and he hid his money in the ground. He did nothing with it because of fear.
So what kind of experiences shape our concept of God?
So it's interesting to note that there are 3 people in this story, and the others who received even more talent than he did, they weren't afraid to risk the larger amount. So if we think about the person that received the 5 talents, for example, he received about 100, that 5 talents was the equivalent of about 100 years of wages. And so it would make more sense for him to be afraid, because he could think, wow, this is a large sum of money. What if I went and I invested this large sum and I lost this? I could be in big trouble with the master. But notice that of the 3 servants that are in this story, it's only the 1 servant, only the last servant that had a negative concept of the master that resulted in him being fearful. So that means that there must have been something that happened in this person's life that is independent of the master, that is affecting how he views the master, because the other 2 had no problem trusting the master and going out and working and investing that money. So our self-concept is shaped, our negative God concept is often shaped by negative experiences that we have had early in life. Most relevant is the experiences that we have had with our early caregivers, our mothers and fathers. They are the first authority figures that we know. And so if we had had parents who were harsh and judgmental and critical starting from a very early age, it's not unlikely, or it's very likely, that we are going to portray that same characteristic to God. We are going to see God in that same light. We're going to think that God is critical. We're going to think that God is judgmental. And so it's important to to understand that this man in the parable who had this negative self-concept, it had nothing to do with the master being harsh. It had more to do with his experiences that led to him viewing the master in a harsh way. I've had people that will say to me in counseling session, yes, I know God will forgive other people in the church, but I don't think he'll forgive me. So I will say, what you did, are you saying that what you did is worse than what anyone else have ever done? No, I'm not saying that it's worse, but I feel that God will forgive others, but I just can't see God forgiving me.
And so that leads into my next question is, how does our concept of God affect our relationship with him? So you've alluded to this concept of not being able to accept forgiveness, in spite of the fact that you've probably not done the worst thing ever, and sin is sin. Mm-hmm. But in what other ways does this concept affect our relationship with God?
So if we go back to the story that we're using as a backdrop for this show today, and we see that this servant said to the master, "You are a hard man, investing where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed." In other words, you're an unjust man. You are not forgiving and merciful. You are not loving. You are not a tender God with that gives compassion. If you have that kind of concept of God, then it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to have a vibrant devotional life, because who would want to spend time with someone who is harsh and critical and unloving? If that's the kind of image that you have, the kind of concept that you have of God, then it's not going to result in you having the kind of intimacy in prayer. So a lot of times when people say, I don't have a good prayer life because I'm too busy, it's often not because of the busyness, because even people who say that they're busy, they can spend hours watching Survivor and The Bachelorette and, all of those shows on television. But it's that they can't spend time alone with God, because it's not a comforting feeling to be alone. And so because the concept of God is that he's harsh, he's punitive in nature, he's highly critical because of their experiences early in life. And so it pushes you away from wanting to spend time with him.
I'm just thinking of other experiences people may have had in their younger years. So you've talked about that unrelenting, unforgiving, just on you all the time type of upbringing. But for people who've experienced parents who aren't actually even available, how does that come out in their concept of God? Do they think he's even there?
Absolutely. So for people who, that's a good point, I should say, for people who feel that their parents have abandoned them in some shape or form, maybe they were given up to foster homes, or they had parents who just was never there for them when they needed them. They couldn't count on them to come through at times when they really needed them to be there. It's not uncommon for these people to believe in a God that is not going to be there when he's needed, to feel that God will abandon them. They will feel that God will be there for others. I can understand how others might count on God, but I can't understand why God would be there for me. I had a case many years back where this young man, he went to the altar. He had a back problem for many, many years, and he went to the altar and he got healed. And I didn't know that he got healed. So he came to a session. He was very excited at the beginning of the session. And then he said, guess what happened this weekend? My back pain is gone. Because he was always telling me for years he's doing physiotherapy, he's going to chiropractic treatment, and his back pain is still making him unable to work and unable to provide for his family. And he said, my back is healed. And he started crying. And from the tears, I could tell that it wasn't like tears of joy. It was as if he was overcome with some kind of bewilderment or sadness. And then I said to him, what's the matter? You're saying that God healed you, but at the same time, you look sad and you're crying. And he said, I can't understand why God would do that for me. It just doesn't make any sense. He just couldn't accept that healing. He just feel that it didn't make any sense. And when I dig a little deeper as to why he felt that way, it came out that he was abandoned by his father. His father was never there for him. And so his concept of God was not a God who would give him a special favor by healing him. And so it just didn't fit in his world, and it resulted in him shedding those tears.
So if you're just joining us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show. With us in studio is Michael Hart as well as Melissa Waggett. Today we're just talking about God concept and how our perception of who God is often affected by experiences in the past and can sometimes rob us of our blessings as a result. If you've missed the first part of the show, we encourage you to check out the earlier part of our podcast at our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Or if you have any questions about Elim Counseling Ministry or the program, please reach out to us by phone at 613-699-1677 or contact us through our website. Again, that's elimcounselingministry.com. So, Michael, you've just finished describing some of the effects and consequences of having this negative God concept on our relationship with God. I'm also wondering how it affects our relationship with others.
Well, if someone have a concept of God that they feel that God as an authority figure is judgmental and harsh and, highly critical of them, just waiting for them to sin so that he can zap them with lightning or whatever punishment he wants to perpetrate on them, then it's not a stretch of the imagination to see that this would carry over into relationship with other authority figures as well. Because if you have a problem with trusting authority figures based on your early childhood, where your mom and your father was never dependable, they were critical, they were judgmental, then what will happen in authority figures, for example, in the workplace, someone might read criticism, might interpret actions of their boss in an overly negative way, when it might be that the boss is just trying to help. So the authority figure in the workplace might just be pointing out that there was a mistake on this document. But to that person, because of the past that they've had, they're hearing that I'm going to be fired, or they're hearing you don't like me, or they're hearing that there is something wrong with me. And as a result, that relationship in the workplace can become a very toxic one. Similarly, even relationship with people in general can become very difficult, because if you can't trust God, then it could also mean that you have difficulty trusting others. In this parable, the story that we have just read, where this man saw God, the master in the story, as being harsh and unfair, then guess what? This is probably his view, his worldview, his concept of the world in general, that people in general can't be trusted. People in general are unfair. People in general harvest where they have not sown seed, and that they're rootless. And so our God image also sometimes show the kind of picture that we have of others also.
And I'm also wondering, how does it rob us individually of different things when we have this negative view of God?
So if we go back to this parable, and we're looking at the parable of the talents, and the person who had this negative concept of the master, who in this story represent God, we see that the Bible tells us that the person was afraid. So the first consequence of that is that we live in a state of negative emotion, fear. And when you live in fear, then it's very limiting. If your self-concept creates your emotion, I should say, or your concept of the world around you, is sometimes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because notice that this man thought that the master was hard and judgmental, and so he acted in a way that caused the master to be angry at him. Whereas when the other servants who didn't fear the master and believed that the master was unfair, these servants received praise from the master. So the way that we approach the world based on our concept of how we see others in the world will affect how things work out for us. In some motivational speech, they talk about the law of attractions, but I don't necessarily have to get that spooky to feel that there's some kind of a law that's going to just attract good to us if we think positive. I'm just saying that there are very practical, tangible ways in which we make bad things happen. In the story, this man thought that the master was harsh. He didn't do anything with the money that he was given because out of fear, and as a result, it ended up with the master being harsh towards him because of his inactivity and his lack of productivity. So you asked me what are some of the consequences for living in fear. I think the other consequence is not maximizing your potential in life, because this person could have gone out and could have earned a lot more on the money that he was given by the master, but because of his fear, he buried it in the ground. So maybe you're listening to this show today and you're saying, maybe I'm a little bit like that servant. Maybe I have this talent. I've always known that I have these gifts that have been given to me by God, but I have done nothing because I'm fearful of how others might criticize me. I'm fearful of failure. I'm fearful that, somehow I will fail, and I have just done nothing. I'm saying that you can rise above that. You don't have to remain in that place. You can rise above that.
And so if someone is listening and they're identifying with what we're talking about today and they do want to rise above, what kind of steps should they be taking?
Well, I think the first step is to realize what is shaping your God concept. What is shaping your concept of God? In the examples we have given so far, we have talked about how it's often what happened in childhood, what happened with our early caregivers, our parents, in this case, that ends up shaping how we see God. Now, if you can realize where it's coming from, a lot of time that realization is an aha moment. Sometimes when clients come in, and they are talking about God, I take a sheet, and on one side of the sheet, I draw a line on the middle, and on one side, I have the things that they're telling me about God. So they will say, for example, yes, God, is unforgiven. God is unreliable. God will never come true for me. And I start listing those things. And then I ask them about their parents, about their father, for example. And then I say, tell me about your father. And as they start talking, I start checking off each of those things that they said also about God. And then I show them the sheet and I said, look, you have just said here that your father and God is identical. You think your father was judgmental. You think God was judgmental. You said your father was never there for you. You felt God was never there for you. Your father was very punitive and very, very quick to punish. And you think the same thing about God. And at times, there's like a light bulb that goes on. So I think the first step that you can take is just realizing where that God concept comes from, that it has been shaped by the parents you had. The second thing I think you need to do once you realize that is then now to begin to heal those emotions that is resulting in you living in fear. This man in the parable was living in fear because of his emotions. Once those emotions are healed, then he would be able to trust God. He would be able to have a good relationship with God, and he would be able to be productive and achieve his dreams. So if you're listening to this show today, I'm saying that it's possible to rise above that by taking these steps. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today, so I'm going to encourage you to give us a call at 613-699-1677 if you'd like to find out more about this subject. Or you can go to our website at elimcounselingministry.com and contact me by email. Remember also the support group that we have, the depression support group that we have, and you can find out more about that again on our website, elimcounselingministry.com.
It was great joining you again, Michael.
Yes, this was a very I was very excited to do this show because I think there are a lot of people out there who are living far below their potential, and that God is saying that they need to change their concept that they have of Him. They need to develop healthy God concepts. See God as being loving. See God as being merciful. See God as being a God that wants the best for them. And when you do so, you can soar to great heights. So we're out of time today. So until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services, praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.